for me, one of the main reasons why I became an esthetician was because I wanted to make people feel good about themselves. I wanted their skin to look the best that it can look, and because we lead with our face, it's the first thing people see, it is very important that we portray a certain image and that we have a very clean look to our skin. It just makes us feel better about ourselves. It gives us better confidence. We carry ourselves better. And it's really one of the main reasons why I became an esthetician. I have one of my clients who's, I guess he's about 15, or actually he's 16 now, but when he was about 14, he had started developing really bad acne. And one of the first times he came to me, he came in, I said, "Hey, Justin, how you doing? How's everything going?" And he said, "You know, Don, I wake up every day, and I wake up in such a great mood, and I'm always happy." He said, "And then I look in the mirror." And I got so upset, I got so choked up, and I was really had to hold back the tears when he said it to me. But it just really showed me how much this was affecting him and how deeply it was affecting him. And whether you call it acne or zits or blemishes or pimples, whatever you call it, this is a very annoying and very persistent skin condition to deal with. It's a very, very big concern for many of our clients, and something that can certainly cause a lot of emotional distress. It can certainly affect their self-esteem, possible depression. There's higher rates of suicide among people that suffer from acne. The important thing to realize is that the earlier the treatment is started, the lower the risk of long-lasting physical and emotional damage caused by acne. And as estheticians, we have a really, really great opportunity to really help make a significant difference. So it can certainly be a very challenging condition to treat, but it is certainly one of the most rewarding conditions to treat when we see the improvement in their skin and in their confidence. So let's start with the definition. Acne is a chronic inflammatory skin disorder of the sebaceous glands characterized by papules, comedones, or cysts, also known as acne simplex or acne vulgaris. Typically, we start to see flare-ups during puberty, but we can certainly see adult acne, and this is something that is on the rise. It usually starts with an increased sebaceous activity, and typically we're seeing acne on the face, but we'll also see it on the neck, chest, back, and shoulders. And any of the acne that we're seeing can range from very mild breakouts to very disfiguring cysts to scarring. It has varying degrees. Typically when we're seeing acne on the body, on the back, on the shoulders, these are the areas that have the largest, densest numbers of functional oil glands, which is why we see it there as opposed to seeing it on the arms or the shins or something like that. Who's affected? About 40 to 50 million Americans are affected. Nearly 85% of people experience some form of acne during our lifetime. And I know for me, I certainly developed it, and it was really a matter of understanding how to control it. Most common skin condition in America is acne. It does affect people of all racial and ethnic groups. Acne does not discriminate. Generally, it begins during puberty. We're aware of this, right? This is nothing shocking. This is when we're seeing fluctuating hormones, but really anytime there's fluctuating hormones, whether it's puberty, pregnancy, menstruation, menopause, birth control pills, all of these can affect the amount of sebum production that's happening. More than 4 in 5 teenagers develop some form of acne. 30% of them have a severe enough form of acne that it requires medical attention. This is where it's really scary. The suicide rate is 6 times higher among teens with acne. Really, really scary that someone would even contemplate suicide because of acne, but this just shows how deeply it does affect people. Teenage boys are more likely than girls to develop it because males secrete more androgen hormones, which is the male hormone that contributes to acne. Certainly girls have it, but not as high of an amount as men have it. Typically, the earlier acne starts, if we're seeing it between the ages of 8 and 11, unfortunately, the more severe it will be as a teenager. Usually it ends when the teenage years are over, but it can certainly last into the 30s and 40s. or it can first develop in adulthood. And I've definitely gotten those clients where they say, I've never had a blemish in my life. Now I'm in my 40s and I'm starting to get blemishes. What the heck is going on? And so it's certainly something that we're seeing on the rise for varying reasons, and we'll go through those a little bit later. But more women adults are affected basically because we have the cosmetics that we use. A lot of them tend to be oil-based. We certainly have varying levels of hormones throughout our lives for different reasons. About 1 in 20 women are affected, and about 1 in every 100 men aged 25 to 40 continue to be affected or develop it at this age. As far as adult acne, it affects about 50% of women between the ages of 20 and 29, and more than 25% of women between the ages of 40 and 49. A third of the adults affected with facial acne will also have some type of body acne. And this is important to understand because people might not realize that we can certainly help them with the acne on their bodies as well, but absolutely we can. So it's important to ask them if they're experiencing this condition anywhere else on their body. It can develop again 20s, 30s, or 40s. Possible causes, fluctuating hormones, discontinuing birth control or switching to a new birth control or starting a new birth control, medications, if it's hereditary, cosmetics, stress, an increase in resistant bacteria, underlying medical conditions. You know, things like polycystic ovaries is something that we need to be aware of. And obviously we're not doctors. We have to be careful. We can't diagnose. We can't prescribe. But, you know, things that you should be aware of as an esthetician. If someone has excessive facial hair, I'm talking about women, if someone has an excessive facial hair, thinning or bald patches on their hair, irregular periods, and this goes along with acne, they might have something like a polycystic ovarian condition that you can talk to them about. You know, you can ask them if it's something that they've been diagnosed with. You might just say to them, you know, some of the symptoms that you have are symptoms of polycystic ovarian syndrome, and it's something that you might want to discuss with your doctor. I'm certainly not saying that you have it, but it's just something that you want to be aware of. You are displaying some of the symptoms of it. You know, we also need to think about the hormones in the food that we're taking in. And we can see this in varying degrees in children as they start to grow up. We're seeing girls developing much, much earlier, getting their periods much earlier. Their breasts are developing much earlier. And a lot of this has to do with the amount of hormones that we're taking in directly through the food. So what happens? How does this all come about? What happens is the sebaceous glands that are located just below the skin surface and at the root of each hair follicle produce sebum. Sebum is a thick, oily substance that is essential to keeping our skin protected and healthy because it lubricates the skin surface. When sebum is overproduced when the male hormones become assertive, typically at the pubescent stage. When the sebum and the debris on the skin and dead skin cells clog the pores, the P. acnes bacteria feed off of the oil and attract white blood cells to the area. The body responds with inflammation to try to flush the infection out, and whiteheads, blackheads, blemishes, and cysts form. Okay, so this is typically what happens and how all of this acne develops. Now, the different types of acne that we'll see on the skin, we'll see things like comedones, which could be blackheads or whiteheads. This is where the openings of the hair follicles or the pore become clogged and blocked with oil secretions, dead skin cells, and bacteria. Blackheads are when it's open at the skin surface. The pore is partially blocked. So it's an open comedone. And because of the dark appearance of the plugs, that dark color is not from dirt. The dark color is the melanin reacting with oxygen. They are very stable structures. They typically take a longer time to clear. Whiteheads are closed comedones. It's when the pore is completely blocked, and they appear as slightly raised skin-colored bumps. Whiteheads typically have a shorter life cycle than blackheads. There's also something called sebaceous filaments, which are similar to open comedones or blackheads, but they're mainly like solidified impactions of oil without the cell matter, and they look a little bit different. They tend to be, they don't have that black look to them. They almost look white or clear when you extract them. Papules are small raised bumps, and this is a signal that there is some type of inflammation or infection in the hair follicle. They have no head, they just look red, and they may be tender. And this typically occurs when there's a break in the follicular wall, the white blood cells rush in, and they become inflamed. Pustules are red, tender bumps with white or yellow pus at the tip. So this usually forms several days after the papule when the white blood cells make their way to the surface of the skin. Nodules are large, solid, painful bumps beneath the surface of the skin. They're formed by a buildup of secretions deep in the hair follicle. And nodules can last for months. And a lot of times this is where scarring becomes an issue because of how deep these are. Unresolved nodules can leave the impaction behind. They can flare up again and again. But it's important that we do not squeeze a nodule. This can cause more severe trauma to the skin. It can cause that nodule to last for months longer than it would. This is when dermatologists certainly need to come into the picture. And at this point, a dermatologist might inject cortisone into the nodule, and this will help to lessen the swelling and to prevent any scarring from happening. Cysts are painful, pus-filled lumps beneath the skin's surface. They are boil-like, and again, these also might cause scarring because of how deep they are. They are very deep pockets of infection. They're very similar to a nodule, but cysts have pus in them. They're usually about 5 millimeters in diameter. Again, we're not squeezing these. They can cause the infection to go deeper and become more painful, last longer, and again, this is something where dermatologists can get involved and do some type of cortisone shot to help bring down the inflammation that they're experiencing. Milia are tiny white pearly-looking bumps. They occur when oil and dead skin cells get trapped in small pockets on the skin surface. They are common in newborns. They disappear on their own within several weeks. In adults, they are very easily removed with a lancet without any scarring. You do have to pay attention to your state regulations. In New Jersey, we are not allowed to use lancets, so just be aware of what your state regulations are. But it's very easy to just lance them open and remove them. They kind of just pop right out, and there's no scarring left behind. Typically, you're seeing these usually around the eye area. Sometimes it can be because people use way too much eye cream or product around that area. So just something to keep in mind. A grading system was developed to categorize the various stages of acne, ranging from closed comedones to cystic lesions. It goes from grade 1 to grade 4, and it's characterized by the number of lesions, comedones, papules, pustules, or cysts that are present. In grade 1, this is also known as acne simplex. This is where you will see open or closed comedones. Remember, those are whiteheads or blackheads. You might also see a few papules or pustules. Typically, scarring is unlikely here. Hyperpigmentation or texture changes may be present because the client can't stop picking at their own skin. Typically, you're not seeing any type of inflammatory lesions or cysts here. And typically, the scarring is not such a concern because typically this grade of acne is very superficial. It does feel bumpy, so it is very important to exfoliate. Almost everyone falls into this category at some point in their life. And with grade 1 acne, you can do microdermabrasion on top so that it helps with the exfoliation process. You never want to do microderm on real active acne, but something like grade 1 is fine. Grade 2 acne is also known as acne simplex. You, again, will see many open or closed comedones here, as well as papules and pustules. Again, the scarring is unlikely because, again, it's typically more superficial. Salicylic acid here is good here. Microderm is good here. And certainly we're doing extractions. Grade 3 acne is a form of acne vulgaris. It primarily affects adolescents. This is where you're seeing redness, inflammation, and bacterial lesions. You're seeing open and closed comedones. You're seeing many papules and pustules. Scarring is now getting more likely at this point, and this is where you might want to start bringing in a dermatologist, okay? Start dealing with this early to prevent the scarring. You may need antibiotics at this point. It's really crucial to educate your clients and let them know that they absolutely have to avoid popping and picking because that can certainly worsen or prolong the redness and the scarring. Extractions should absolutely be done by an esthetician. This can help to eliminate pressure. It helps to eliminate inflammation and to speed the healing. At this point, we may also need to focus on more calming treatments. You know, so much of acne is helping to get the bacteria under control, but when people are really starting to get very, very inflamed or tender, at that point, you really want to help to calm the skin down as well. You may also start to see the start of some nodules here, so it really is important that we get our clients on a really good professional and home care regimen. Grade 4 acne is known as cystic acne. This is where we are dealing with deeper cystic nodules, papules, pustules, comedones. Scarring is very, very likely because this is where you're really dealing with some deep infection. The scarring may not just be a hyperpigmentation, but it may also include the pitted or hypertrophic scarring, and certainly they need to be seeing a derm here. Antibiotics are a must at this point. This is where we really need to manage the acne to really help shorten the duration and the severity of it. Depending on the severity, acne lesions can take up to 2 months to fully heal. We really, really have to resist the urge to squeeze at this point because it's so deep. If you're not getting that infection out, if you're not completely releasing it, no matter what grade the acne is, the infection has nowhere else to go except to spread further underneath the skin and create more blemishes. So it's really important that we're not extracting where we shouldn't be, and if extractions need to be done, they're being done by a professional. So there's 4 main causes of acne. The first one is increased keratinization within the follicle. Basically, the comedo is usually the first sign of acne. It's a combination of keratinized and lipid material due to the change in the keratinization pattern. The proliferative rate of keratinocytes of sebaceous glands increases. The increased rate plus lipid keratin complex causes plug for the sebaceous glands. This is also known as follicle fallout. It's basically when the sebaceous glands are overstimulated, dead skin cells shed more rapidly, and the blockages in the follicle become more common. The second main cause is increased sebum production. All right. Certainly there is more sebum being produced and being layered on the top of the skin surface. This sebum contains free fatty acids, which are products of triglyceride hydrolysis. The third main cause is hormones. So the androgen hormones level increases. This can be caused by puberty, menstruation, pregnancy, menopause, birth control pills, anything like that. The fourth main cause is the proliferation of P. acnes bacterium. Bacteria causes the pustules and produces inflammation, redness, and the pus can result. The thing to keep in mind is that this bacteria is anaerobic. It cannot grow where oxygen is present. We always have this bacteria present in our follicles. However, when we start to get these impactions building up on top of the bacteria, it provides a fantastic breeding ground for this bacteria to grow. So I like to picture a garbage can. I just think that this is an easy way to picture it, and picture that there's bacteria on the bottom, right? We all have bacteria at the bottom of our pores. As our pores start to get filled and get impacted with oil and dirt and dead skin cells, just like a garbage can starts to get filled with garbage, that bacteria at the bottom no longer has any oxygen reaching it. So now it has a great breeding ground to grow. As that infection starts to fester, an inflammatory response starts to happen, white blood cells come to it, and it starts to force the impaction out. The inflammation starts to push everything out onto the skin, and this is where we're starting to see all of these papules and pustules and so on start to form. This is just the stages of the impaction forming. We know typically the sebum travels up along the hair shaft. It travels right out through the hair follicle or the pore onto the skin surface. When there is an excess sebum and dead skin cells, they build up in the follicle and they form a plug, and this causes the follicle wall to bulge and produce a whitehead or a plug. It may be open to the surface and darken. If it's deep in a follicle, it can cause a cyst. So it's really important that we understand what's happening inside of the pore. As that bacteria and the inflammation grow, the pressure is put on the follicle wall. If that wall ruptures, it can get infected. The debris spills out onto the surface. Basically, the body now detects a foreign object in the skin, and the white blood cells come to fight the infection. The papules are formed. If they get infected, pus develops, and this leads to pustules. Okay? Other factors that can contribute to acne: direct exposure to greasy, oily substances. If you are highly susceptible to acne or to breakouts, you know if you touch something oily, your hands are greasy, you touch your face, there's a good chance you're going to break out in that area. The environment certainly affects our skin, whether it's pollution, high humidity. In our area, we are praying for spring sometime soon, but we know as soon as the hot, humid weather starts to roll in, we are absolutely starting to see more breakouts on the skin. Food can absolutely affect it, whether it's high in sugar, iodine, caffeine, nicotine, starches, carbs, fats. We'll get into the food thing a little bit later, but it can certainly be a factor that can increase the breakouts. Drugs, absolutely. Steroids are a form of hormones. The more hormones we have, the more breakouts we're going to see, which is why when people are on steroids, you typically see them breaking out. Usually on their back is when you see those big breakouts happening. Genetics, unfortunately, if your parents had it, you are certainly more likely to develop it as well. Friction can be from phones or helmets or tight collars or backpacks, anywhere where there's some type of friction on the body that will certainly increase the acne that you're experiencing. Sun exposure. People will say, I go into the sun because it dries up my skin and it makes my acne disappear. Maybe for a short time, but long term, sun, if you're in the sun for too long, will damage the skin and cause more cell buildup. The tanning that you're getting only masks the redness. Once that tan fades and the cell buildup subsides, you're left with clogged pores. So in the long run, it's not going to help. You do need to watch your sun exposure. And it's not all bad, but it does have to be limited. Stress, absolutely. Okay? Stress causes the brain to manufacture hormones that stimulate our adrenal glands, and that makes more hormones, which causes an abundance of sebum to be produced. So absolutely it will affect our breakouts. And we know, we get stressed out, we break out, right? Stress also suppresses the immune system. So that's another thing to keep in mind, that we are not fighting off infection and healing the way that we typically would when we have high stress levels in our life. So is stress and acne related? Absolutely. Stress can certainly aggravate acne symptoms. It weakens our organs. We know skin is the largest organ of the body, so it will certainly affect the skin. And stress is not only emotional stress. It's not only when, oh my God, I have so much to do at work, I'm so stressed out. It can also be a physical stress. Okay? It can be if we are working out too much, if we're not getting enough sleep, if we have real hectic lifestyles, or if we have very sedentary lifestyles as well. It can also be things like smoking and drinking and doing drugs that are physical stresses to our body. Stress causes the adrenal glands to go into overdrive. It produces excess androgens. This leads to more acne. Okay? Adrenaline is supposed to help us cope with stressful events. This is why this whole reaction happens in the body. But when we have chronic stress, it's certainly not a good thing. It causes an inflammatory response, which can cause the walls of the pores to break. The body will then respond with redness and an influx of pus. Do our nerves affect our skin? Yes. The skin is supposed to eliminate 3 pints of poison every day. I love this page. This is like such great information for me. If those 3 pints of poison that our skin is eliminating every day was to be injected back into our bloodstream, we would die within 3 days of blood poisoning. Pretty interesting fact, right, when we think about really the importance of the elimination process that our skin is doing for us. What happens is when we get tense, when we get tight, when we get tense, when we get nervous, our body tenses up and this tightens up the pores. And the result is that we cannot eliminate all of the toxins and the skin erupts, whether it's with breakouts, whether it's with eczema, whatever the case may be. Stress causes an increased burden on the kidneys and the heart, which also have a lot to do with the body's elimination. So all of this is very important to keep in mind.